From Fox 8 Sports, this is the Overtime Podcast.
From the Fox 8 studios in New Orleans, this is the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Fazende, riding shotgun as he does each and every podcast. It's Andre Johnson
Jr.
Do not forget the Jr. is very important to remember the JR at the end of the name. Before we get into today's content, be sure to like, share, rate, and review. If you are watching us on YouTube, hit that subscribe button, get the bell notification for when we drop that fire content. And today is Monday. Back in the comfy confines of the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast studio, no longer on Radio Row. What a week it was for the city of New Orleans. What a week on a personal level it was for us, for this show in particular. Some amazing guests, some amazing energy. And then the game comes. It was a total dominating effort by one team. Was not expecting that, but nonetheless, it was a fantastic week. And I would say for the Fox 8 Overtime Podcast, we took advantage of the opportunity and made sure to make our presence felt out there. And judging by some of the numbers that we got from YouTube and other areas that we judged in terms of our ratings, it looks like the response from you guys was great as well. Also, hello to the Gulf Coast Sports Entertainment Network. I want to make sure I say hello to you guys out there. Thank you for finding us here. How you feeling, Andre?
I'm feeling good. You know, shout out to everybody and thank you to everybody who watched and listened over the last week. You know, we had some great numbers there. The ones who shared it with their friends, because getting guests is something that's really cool. You know, it's something we've been wanting to do for a while. And, you know, being able to talk to guys like Marcus Colston, Jimmy Graham, Dramon Bushrod, Bub Means,
Valdez-Scantling.
Marquez Valdez-Scantling. It was just such a fun week talking to so many cool people. Hold the Mayo, you know, Saints super fan. It was a cool week down on Super Bowl Media Row. We're back in here now, so we don't have to keep our head on a swivel, you know, to see if we're missing anybody. No Cam Newton or anybody's going to go walking, you know, in the back of this studio. So we're back home for the time being.
Yeah, and look, man, it was a week, man. I was talking to somebody earlier today. They asked me about the week. I was like, it was busy, but it was a fun busy. Like, we stayed busy, but we had a lot to do, but I enjoyed it all. I really did. But when I got home last night, we were on the air until well past midnight after the final play, because the way the game was on Fox, and they had a show after, and then we went to news, then went to the final play. And I got home at about a little after 1, probably fell asleep about 2, and then I had to get up early to help get my kids ready to go to school. I was just, wow. It hit me right then and there. I didn't really feel like the fatigue much during the week because we had so much adrenaline, because we had so many exciting things we were doing, and really was exciting because we didn't know what we were going to get on Radio Row, and all of a sudden, that's what we ended up getting. A lot of fantastic guests, but it kind of felt it this morning, so we're all trying to battle back. But today, I wanted to get into, and look, we're going to keep checking the phones because this could change at any minute. You all understand that. We understand that. As of this second, check was at the end of the pod, but as of this second, Kellen Moore is not the head coach of the Saints. But as of this second, he's still expected to be. So with that in mind, and with the utter domination by the Philadelphia Eagles over the Kansas City Chiefs, that's what we wanted to go with the big picture today.
Right. You know, Kellen Moore and the Eagles just completely ran over the Chiefs in Super Bowl 59. It was never really a contest. You kind of kept waiting and saying, okay, well, it's close enough for Mahomes to come back. Wait a minute, you know, maybe he's going to go on that trademark run that we've seen the Chiefs do so many times. It never happened. Complete domination for the Eagles. So as we look at Philadelphia, a team that scored a lot of points all year, but especially on Super Bowl Sunday, how did Kellen Moore handle himself, you know, the potential future head coach for the New Orleans Saints?
I gave it an A. I gave it an A. I loved it. You would have never known there was a potential for a distraction from the Eagles offensive coordinator and hopefully soon to be head coach of the New Orleans Saints, Kellen Moore. And think about how much of a storyline that had become. I was posting certain clips that we had from Kellen Moore where we were able to find him at media night, and a lot of Philly fans had found those sound bites and was, I'm concerned about the game. I hope he's not too distracted. There wasn't 1 ounce of that game where you ever felt like the Eagles were off target or were off their game, or Kellen Moore was sort of off of what he wanted to do, what he intended to do in this game. And I went back and it felt a certain way watching it. And of course, I went back and rewatched most of it. I got through the first half and maybe the first half of the third quarter. So I'm about 2.5 quarters in, just to kind of get a feel for what I was seeing. And honestly, what I liked is that it's a very steady, very clean, very smooth approach. You don't really see a whole lot of crazy bells and whistles. There was that one play where the 2 tackles lined up wide, but other than that, I didn't really see a whole lot of exotic type stuff. What really stood out to me was how much Kellen Moore seemed to be in sync with his offensive personnel. And that obviously is the key to having any sort of success as a coordinator. So that's why he has had success as a coordinator. How does that translate to being a potential head coach? We'll find that out eventually. But like I said, not a whole lot of complicated stuff. Yeah. I think that guy and that team and that organization has basically said, we're winning behind the line of scrimmage on both. We're running behind our bigs, and we're dominating on our defensive line. And never was that more apparent than last night at the Super Bowl. You didn't see, a little bit of motion here and there, but, everybody was on that motion kick a couple of years ago when the Saints didn't have it. It's not like this guy ran a whole lot of crazy motions and exotic things that were going. It was fairly straightforward. Like I said, fairly clean, fairly smooth. It really does boil down to simple execution and, frankly, having better personnel than the team that they were playing. And that in and of itself is a strength, because may not necessarily always have that personnel advantage, but if you have it, use it. Don't overthink it. And that's the biggest thing I've come away from watching Kellen Moore. He doesn't overthink it. And I think that is a great attribute to have. I know he's not going to have the personnel advantage should he come to the Saints that he currently has and enjoys with the Eagles, who, in my opinion, have the best roster in football, and they were the best team in football. But Kellen Moore did an outstanding job of staying within himself and playing complementary football. I mean, why get foolish? Why get cute? They were dominating, and he stayed with the dominating football. And I can guarantee you this, they had a plan for attack and how they were going to attack the game. And also, you just talk to coaches, this is what they have an idea of how the game will play out. I can promise you that's not the way they planned it.
Yeah.
So if that's not the way they planned it, we'll stay within the moment. And I thought they did a really good job of staying within the moment. Kellen Moore I'm talking about. He was forced to do things. The only thing that I thought Kansas City did fairly well was they contained Saquon Barkley. And Saquon Barkley was he's a huge part of their offense, a huge part of what they had to do. So if you want to talk about maybe a subtle adjustment he had to make, it wasn't that Saquon played bad. It's just he wasn't going off for 70 and 60 like he did in previous playoff games. And I can promise you that he was a big part of the Eagles' game plan. But as a coach, you have to have a counter. Okay, I know that they know that Saquon Barkley is our best player. We're going to try to win with Saquon Barkley, but if we can't, this is what I'm going to do. This is my counter. How many times will we use that expression on this pod? You got to have a counter, because the Saints didn't have one offensively this year with Clint Kubiak and with the Saints offense in the way they were able or not able to do things once the riddle got solved. Or, in this case, I never really felt like, did you really think Saquon really got going in this game? He was okay.
No, I was waiting for him to break when I kept saying he's due. You know how Saquon is. He'll get shut down on 20 carries, but on that 21st, 55 yards to the crib.
Yeah, you kept waiting for that home run ball, and I think Kansas City was very aware of that, and they were going to live with the idea of we're going to shut down or contain Saquon Barkley and make him or make other players beat us, like Jalen Hurts, like A.J. Brown, like Dallas Goedert, but it obviously all starts with quarterback Jalen Hurts, which brings me to my next point, why I like Kellen Moore and why I think he has been consistently good with different types of quarterbacks. He has a synergy with whoever he has playing quarterback. He has a very detailed knowledge of what that quarterback does well and does not do well. There is nothing more important than that as an offensive coordinator when you're calling plays. You've got to know what the trigger man knows, what he can and cannot do. For instance, Jalen Hurts played a really good game yesterday, but if you go back and watch, there are certain things you can call with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts, but there's also certain things you cannot call with a quarterback like Jalen Hurts. You can add the QB power and the QB draw, which you can't do, and it just takes a little time, and if you really watch the game, how it plays out, you can't throw a lot of intermediate and breaking routes. You can't throw a lot of shorter in breaking routes. A lot of the throws are towards the sideline unless they're running that kind of mesh concept, which I'll get to in a second, where it's kind of a layered approach. But usually in breaking routes, middle of the field, between the seams, you don't really see Jalen really dominate from there. And Kellen doesn't call those plays. So that's really what it boils down to when it comes to coaching and offensive football and football in general. What can my players do? What can they not do? Put them in positions to do the things they can do and avoid the things they cannot do. You're not always going to be able to do both. You want to do that as much as humanly possible. And I thought it really showed up last night because, look, when the game got away from them, the Chiefs, you can kind of get the feeling, especially after that Cooper DeJean pick six. That kind of felt like the turning point. And then when Zach Bond got the interception right before half and they scored again.
Saints legend, Zach Bond.
24-0. It really felt like the game was over. But even then, I was like, I don't want to. I'm not going there yet because we've seen this movie before. I don't want to. This is the 28-3 moment from Tom Brady. I wasn't going there yet. And they never snipped it. They never got close. They dominated the Kansas City Chiefs from start to finish. But in Kellen Moore's case, I liked the approach. It just didn't feel complicated. It felt straightforward. And it felt like we're rolling right here, so I'm not going to do anything stupid to mess this up. And we're just winning one-on-one matchups. My 3 favorite calls. Early in the game, there's a second down throw to Dallas Goedert. I love the concept. There's kind of a double drag, 2 different layers. It's one of the few times you saw Jalen Hurts work the middle of the field, but it was more of Dallas Goedert coming across about 12 to 15 yards downfield and A.J. Brown coming about 3 or 4 yards across the field, but they're coming from the same side. I love that play. Went for about 20. There is the touchdown throw to A.J. Brown, part of the mesh concept. And let me give you guys a hint, or not a hint, but let me just give you guys a little bit of a heads up. You will see a film study very soon on the mesh concept with Kellen Moore because that is his play. That's the play he loves to run. It happened in the Saints game, by the way. He ran it with Goddard. This time he ran it with A.J. Brown. Beautifully called. And also, of course, the kill shot. Knowing when to hit the kill shot, obviously, dial up the go ball. Jalen Hurts to Devontae Smith. That's all she wrote. It is over. So how did I think? What were my impressions of Kellen Moore? Job well done, sir. And right now, I'm getting a little excited about the potential of him becoming the head coach of the New Orleans Saints.
I think a lot of people should be. I give him an A for that game because, you mentioned Saquon Barkley and how he handled that. And Saquon, in a way, almost getting shut out of the running game. Mm-hmm. I mean, he had 25 carries for 57 yards.
Yeah, right.
If you told me coming in, hey, the Chiefs and Eagles are going to play in the Super Bowl and Saquon Barkley is going to run the ball 25 times and only get 57 yards, I'm telling you Chiefs by 30.
Easy.
That is not what happened. And I actually give Kellen Moore a lot of credit for how he handled Saquon Barkley because he didn't abandon the run, but he also never panicked.
Exactly.
There was never any okay, the run's not working, and you've seen this happen throughout the league. The run's not working. We're going to have to air it out. We need Jalen Hurts to throw the ball. They were up. Jalen Hurts didn't have to throw the ball 40, 50 times in this game. You stuck to giving the ball to Saquon Barkley. You have to make the Chiefs at least respect it because it was very clear that the Chiefs came in and said, hey, you can't have that guy.
You can't have today.
If Jalen Hurts is going to throw the ball and beat us, we're going to dap him up and tell him good game, but we cannot let Saquon Barkley go for 218 and 3 touchdowns. And Kellen Moore took that. He said, okay, I'm going to keep trying to establish the run with my guy. I'm not going to go away from it. I'm not going to overreact. He also said, we're going to get this ground game going regardless because Jalen Hurts, he kept him, rolling outside of the pocket. He had a few design quarterback runs. Jalen Hurts had 11 carries for 72 yards.
Yeah.
And a touchdown.
I think we're about 3 or 4 design, a couple of just off scrambles.
Yeah, exactly. So Jalen Hurts was still able to kind of give you some semblance of a run game from how he played. So I give Kellen Moore credit for not panicking when the Chiefs were able to take away his best player. I also give him credit, and this might be the biggest one, in something that's been the Saints' kryptonite all year, and that's the second half. So many times you have seen the Saints offense, whether it's Derek Carr, Spencer Rattler, they're on fire in the first half. You saw it in the last game of the season against Tampa. On fire in the first half, the offense is rolling. You go into the locker room, and all of a sudden, a completely different team comes out of the locker room. You can't get anything going in the second half. You lose that lead. You lose the game. That did not happen. And Nick Sirianni spoke about it after the game in the post-game press conference. He said, look, I got in that locker room and I looked at my team and I saw a team that was hungry. I saw a team that knows they just lost the Super Bowl 2 years ago, late to a team like Kansas City that can come back and get into the game and clutch a win. We went into that second half like it was 0-0. We weren't up at all, and we still had to win it. And they came out and they won the third quarter 10-6. Now, the Chiefs got 16 points in the fourth quarter, garbage time.
Yeah.
You got backups in. The intensity they were playing with in the first half clearly wasn't there. So I'm not really worried about the fourth quarter, but I learned a lot about Kellen Moore and the Eagles and that offense in the third quarter when they came out and they kept that foot on the gas and they were able to continue to score. You know, like you said, the kill shot to Devontae Smith. That's when you were really like, all right, the Chiefs not coming back. It's over. When they took that, 60-yard bomb to A-Meat's finest, Devontae Smith. So I give Kellen Moore a lot of credit. I think he did a lot of good things. You know, he didn't have to necessarily go for 600 total yards on offense. He took what the defense gave him. He kept with what worked for him all year, which was running the ball. When his number one option wasn't getting loose, he found other ways to, work. Like you mentioned, the mesh concept, the passes to A.J. Brown, the deep bomb to Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts on the ground. I think he did a good job taking what the defense gave him. I think he did a great job coming out of that second half and keeping his offense and his team focused and not letting his foot off the gas like we saw the Saints, his potential future team, do several times this season. So I give him a big thumbs up for how he handled the Super Bowl.
Yeah. I just I'm excited. I'm also like, I'm not just going to say he's a great offensive coordinator, so he's going to be a great head coach. We don't know that yet, obviously. But I liked what I saw. I liked the way he compartmentalized the week. I liked the way he handled the week with the questions. He didn't seem bothered by them. He didn't seem burdened by them. He didn't seem overwhelmed by them. He didn't seem frustrated by them. He put it in its proper place. He handled it correctly. And then he went out and did what he was supposed to do while he was there. That was to win the game. And do what he had to do to win the game. They put up 40 points, obviously. You can say 2 of those touchdowns were set up by the defense. So what? They still scored 40 points. It is a little bit of a different skill set when you're dealing with the entire team as opposed to the one side of the team, one side of the ball. So I think the easiest transition Moore is going to make is the actual calling of offensive plays. The other stuff that comes with being a head coach, there is going to be a little bit of learning on the job, and I'm very curious to see when he finally, and by the way, it hasn't happened yet. I just checked. So if and when he becomes Saints head coach, which is what everyone expects him to do, I'm very curious to see how he does. But he showed me enough just in the unique circumstance, because, I mean, this doesn't happen all the time where you're hiring a coordinator from a Super Bowl and that coordinator nearly has to juggle. You see it in college sometimes where a guy might be leaving and they got to do the recruiting from another team for his next team or whatever the case may be. But you don't really see it a lot in the NFL. So I thought he handled it really, really well. So I'm very curious when that happens, when that moment comes, if Kellen Moore becomes the next Saints head coach, how he does, because I think he has now shown enough to generate some buzz within the fan base. And like we said, this city, this fan base, this organization, they need some positive momentum. If this is the thing that's got to start it, then so be it. And no better way to start it because, New Orleans needs a boost. New Orleans got a boost.
Oh, yeah.
From the Super Bowl. And that's what I wanted to do with our next topic.
Yeah, the city hosted its 11th Super Bowl, tying the record for most Super Bowls hosted by a city. And you kind of take it for granted when you live here and you see these things all the time. But when you listen to people who are coming into the city from out of town, I did not talk to a single person. And I talked to a lot of people last week who came in town and said, man, this sucks. The people came in and they absolutely love New Orleans, from the hospitality to the restaurant. They love the food, the restaurants, the way that the city handled the big game. Everything was safe for the most part. Like from what I hear, people are giving this a big A+ for the Saints and the Super Bowl. It's just, it really impressed me how the city put on the biggest event in America. What did you see?
Yeah, look, this was a flawless week. It was almost a flawless week last time until the lights went out in the Superdome. But this was a flawless week for the city of New Orleans.
For keeping them lights on.
A lot of national media that I've seen or just kind of seen how they posted, they raved about the city hosting the Super Bowl and how it should be back into the regular rotation, and I absolutely think it will be. This was a flawless show. This was a flawless performance. This was an A+. This was a perfect grade from the natural resources of proximity, the way they laid everything out logistically, which is not always easy to do. There were a few traffic jams, in a few hours you didn't necessarily like it, but that was a little bit to be expected. All things considered, I'm telling y'all, I've been to other cities for Super Bowls, 10 times the amount of traffic. 10 times the amount of traffic. And then the walkability of everything, the proximity, even the game day logistics. I mean, we walk right in. I mean, I remember when we went to Miami, I mean, it took us almost an hour to get in just because the security clearance, where you had to park, where you had to walk. I mean, the access just to get into the stadium was very accessible and very reasonable when you talk about the biggest game on earth in your hometown, and the entire world is descended upon you and the eyeballs are on you. So I thought it was well done from a natural resources standpoint, from an execution standpoint, and clearly the national media liked it. But there's another factor that I really wanted to touch on here in our last few minutes. Do not underestimate local engagement and local energy and local excitement. This is the most local city, major metropolitan city you will find in America. You'll see small towns that are local like this, but you and I know we're from here. Yep. This is a local town. This is a local city. The overwhelming majority of people that you and I know are from here. They grew up here. This is a town. This is a city where people stay. So do not underestimate how local this is. And the locals take the ownership of this is our city. This is our game. That is what brings the authenticity, which also brings that energy that you cannot fake. These national media people are trying to describe it. We know what it is. We know what it is. It's that local energy that understands it's our time to shine. Everybody went into Mardi Gras mode.
Yep.
They went into Mardi Gras mode, and that local energy,
was so natural.
So natural. Authenticity brings the energy and the excitement and just the overall fun and the overall good vibes. Everyone in this town understood the assignment. Yep. Everyone understood the assignment. Was there I think there were one or two small things that happened, but no crime or no crazy crime. There were a couple things happening here and there. I don't want to say zero, but for the most part, everyone stepped up. Everyone understood this is our chance to host a big game. We're going to put on a show, and everybody involved was excited about it, and they embraced it. I mean, that's Saturday before the game where they had the parade. I'm seeing these photos. I'm seeing these photos of Bourbon Street. I see a lot of local people that were down there, obviously combined with the tourists and the fans that came in town for the big game and the media. You need that because you get that natural feel as opposed to a little bit of that corporate sort of, I don't want to say fake, but a little bit of a I'm at a corporate event feel in some other cities. It felt more natural in New Orleans, and that's why I believe come 2030, come 2031, you will see New Orleans hosting the big game again.
Yep, breaking the record potentially. And just one thing about New Orleans, as somebody who grew up here, left, went to Ohio for a while and came back, been to a few other cities. There are things you can do here that you just can't do anywhere else. I'm not even talking about carrying liquor with an open container. I'm talking about the foods that you can eat. You can try to make those foods elsewhere. The worst restaurant I ever went to was in Ohio, a quote-unquote New Orleans restaurant. No seasoning whatsoever. The way we cook down here, the way the food tastes, beignets and etouffees and gumbos and everything, just all of the culture. It's Mardi Gras season. You got king cakes all over the place. All of the culture and the food that people from all over the place cannot get at home, they have to come here if they really want to get it, and it's unlike any other place that you'll go. So I think New Orleans is always going to impress in areas like that. Speaking of New Orleans, I have one Saints question. We got like 2.5 minutes left. One Saints question that just popped in my head. A phrase that popped in my head was the one that got away. And for years, going to the defensive side of the ball for the Saints, Trey Hendrickson has been the face of the one that got away for the Saints. Saints let him go to Cincinnati. He became a star with the Bengals. Zach Bond, 1 year removed from New Orleans, Defensive Player of the Year nominee, interception of Patrick Mahomes, the best quarterback in the league, in the Super Bowl, now a Super Bowl champion. Is Zach Bond the new face of the one that got away in New
Well,
Orleans?
it's two different lanes for me because I knew Trey Hendrickson could play. I knew he could play. He had 13 sacks the year before he left, and everyone knew he might have priced himself out. So when he left, it was kind of like, okay, that's good for him, but that's he's going to cost a lot of money. He was injured a couple years before that, but he has 13 sacks the year before he leaves, and I knew wherever he went, he was going to have a good career and finish things off. I don't think he was going to catapult himself to what he has become, but you have been wanting that edge pass rusher for so long, and you had him. So that stings. Every single game I watch of the Bengals, Hendrickson is making a big play. Zach Bond's a different category. I had no idea Zach Bond could play. When he left, I was like, yeah, he's got to go. I mean, this guy has been a bust. He's playing out of position. He can't play stack linebacker. He can't play off the ball. He's an edge pass rusher on a 3-4 look. And the Saints try to put was it square peg, round hole, whatever the case may be, and he just never got it. And he even admitted that. All of a sudden, Fangio figures out a way to kind of crack the code, combined with his own football IQ developing into what he's seeing, what he has to do. And all of a sudden, he catapults to a pretty good linebacker. No, it's maybe the best defensive player in the NFL.
Yep.
That, to me, is the most, of all the ones that have happened, and we've had a few over the last couple seasons, that was the most unlikely. Zach Bond's resurgence or emergence is the most unlikely thing I've seen covering the Saints.
To me, Zach Bond hurts more than Trey Hendrickson.
I think
because you had to pay Trey, and you just didn't want to come off that money, and that's, I don't want to say it's fine, but that's one thing. You didn't have to break the bank for Zach Bond.
1 year deal.
You could have gave Zach Bond pebbles, and for the production that he had here in New Orleans, that would have been fine for maybe a 1, 2, 3 year deal. You didn't have to break the bank for him, and he walks away. And you have a defensive genius in Dennis Allen that couldn't crack the code like Vic Fangio does. So, hey, the one who got away. Woulda, coulda, shoulda.
Woulda, coulda, shoulda. Speaking of going away, we got to go away.
Yeah.
For Andre Johnson Jr., I'm Sean Fazende. We'll catch you guys next time on Overtime.